Hello and welcome to Identify, the news, views and insights from within the events industry. I'm joined today by Ash Bladon, who is the COP26 Digital Director at Identity. And I thought, Ash, who better than to get on the phone just to talk about kind of what is happening in the world of virtual around that and that impact it will have, into legacy projects. So Ash, thank you very much for joining me. First things first for the listeners, what is your role?
So my role is the COP Digital Director. So I'm responsible for, well, me and my team are responsible for all of the elements of COP that are effectively digital. So everything from the website that we've got, where participants can log in and see what's happening and learn lots about the event, and also see some digital only elements that we have this year, but also all the remote and virtual participation. So bringing people in, connecting them, following various rule sets depending on the rules on the particular session, so they can connect from anywhere in the world. I'm trying to really expand the reach of COP to make it the most inclusive ever.
And I imagine you're very, very busy.
Yes, that's very true. So I think we're a few days out now from the pre-sessionals, but we've obviously been working really hard since April to get everything lined up and ready to go. Over the weekend, we actually launched the platform. So invites have gone out to 25. I think over the weekend we reached 25,500 registered delegates, participants. They've all been invited to take part in the platform now as well. So it's exciting times for us. And we've just finished building our operations center on site as well.
And clearly, so we've come at this at really unprecedented times. So born out of COVID was virtual and hybrid events, but at the same time, it also was a natural progression for the project. So what are the sort of aspects that are involved in the digital element of COP and why they're so important?
So I think in a lot of ways what we're doing is, our core brief was to try and replicate what's happening on the ground in the physical space, in a virtual space. What you often find when you try and do anything like that is that you're entering what we call digital transformation. So you need to look at how what we're doing actually transforms the process in and of itself. So a lot of what we've been doing is really trying to map out and understand the processes that happen at COP in the physical world, which often aren't as well understood as you might think, because people just do them. They don't really think about what they're doing, they just get on and do it. So it's been a really interesting journey for us to go on with the UN themselves and HMG as well, looking at where all those touch points are. So part of it is like I say, around having this sort of virtual conference space and trying to make people feel engaged with it. Another part is the actual technology, so what happens in the room and the processes to connect people in from different parts of the world. And then this is the mapping all of that out and thinking about how do we actually engage with people and get them to feel included when they're far away.
And I think that transcends a lot of corporate projects as well, where anyone thinking about how they can do this digital transformation, as you describe it, for some of their major events. So I think you've mentioned some really interesting elements. And are you seeing any consistencies across kind of private work that's like this about how you'd have to map it out, or is this really quite pioneering at this stage?
So I think there's definitely an increase in events going hybrid. So events that are both, there's obviously been a lot of fully virtual events because of COVID, but you're also seeing a lot more hybrid events. And one of the early partners we were talking to spoke a lot from the sort of statistics they were seeing about just how much it increases the reach of events, particularly for corporate events, because a lot of people can't afford to travel, or they can't get the time off, and companies don't necessarily want to release their staff for a couple of days to go to an event, but they can tune in and watch the things that are really relevant and key to them. And I think that's something that, COP aside, you can do a lot more with a hybrid or a virtual event than you could do with an in-person event, is to really make it as time efficient as possible, because people can just see the bits that are relevant. But you've also got this additional networking functionality where we can get people into like a virtual meeting, so you can see other people and maybe they've asked interesting questions, or maybe you can see from their bio that they're someone that's got something in common with you, and you can set up a side meeting with them virtually, whether they're there or not. So there's a lot of potential. I think it's something we're only just beginning to tap into, but I definitely think it's something that's here to stay.
And not from necessarily a technical perspective, but what do you think is one of the greatest challenges that you're having to overcome from a kind of user experience? Is it just that you're talking about around not being a cheap seat?
There's quite a few. So I think one of the hardest things for us is definitely how to engage with people. And one of the things I think is a little unique about this project is we have part of my team which is focused on engagement. Really how to, because people don't normally haven't, COP's been run the same way for the last 26 years. It's 26 years. People aren't used to doing these things virtually. So it's how do we engage with them? How do we make them connect with us and see whether they can access the platform even, because in some countries, certain technologies are blocked. But also it's a fundamental change in the way that they've engaged before. So trying to reach out to people, make them feel comfortable and bring them in. So there's a huge piece to do around that, and understanding all the politics and nuances that go with how you communicate with these people, the way that you can communicate that will make sense to 194 different countries as well is also a bit of a barrier. And then there's people at all levels, from really engaged, eager observer organizations through to diplomats and ministers that really don't have time to look at anything. So that's been a real challenge for us.
And something that's very interesting. So we often talk about digital being a tool that you can use to create a more sustainable event. So we talk about maybe there being restrictions on travel, but actually the net benefit of that is they're not traveling, and so they're not creating this large carbon footprint. But there is also a footprint that goes with delivering digital. So aligning to COP, I guess, best, or other sectors, I'm really interested to learn about what are we doing in order to create a more sustainable legacy with digital, and how can this go on for future COPs?
So yeah, so from a sustainability impact, it's really interesting because, like you say, in theory, we could reduce the travel to zero. I think with negotiations, there's it's as sort of as long as humanity itself is being able to sort of looking someone in the eyes and talking to them to make deals. So I think there's always going to be a component of that, and I think it would be hard to move away from it fully. But we can enable countries to bring a lot, or organizations, anyone, to bring a lot less people with them, so they can bring their core team. And I think in future years, you might see more and more of the technical staff or the advisors or the people who would normally only be here for 1 or 2 sessions to help advise on that particular issue. They might start dialing in. But again, it's a big behavioral organizational behavioral change piece that we'll only really see play out in the next few years, but definitely really interesting. There is definitely a footprint to delivering anything digital. There's massive server farms, and when we talk about the cloud, it is really like a warehouse somewhere full of computers, lots and lots of warehouses. There's some really interesting technology and things going on in that space, from trying to locate server farms underwater where it's naturally a lot cooler, so they can offset the heat that way. To just trying to find really energy efficient ways of computing and storing data. But we're just generally, for this project, we're looking to just understand how much energy we consume using the platform, and then we'll look to offset that. But yeah, so I definitely think for future COPs, it will be interesting to see, or future events actually, how much the kind of behavioral shift, or how long the behavioral shift takes, and more and more people feel comfortable coming remotely and accessing all the benefits that can bring.
Yeah, and I think you also touched on a point where it's about authentic sustainable events, just because, it's easy to say, oh, we're going to digital and doing that, but actually you need to start questioning the digital solution itself and how you can create a more sustainable digital footprint. It's fascinating.
Yeah, but it's also about, when they talk about sustainability, you've got like your 3 pillars, which is people, profit, and planet. So I think one of the pieces that often gets overlooked is people. So how do we make sure that what we're doing is giving equitable access to everybody? How do we, and that's one of our challenges on this, is how can we try and make it a comparable experience for someone who's in person as it is for someone who's remote? And also, how many languages can we put it in? And this is where you start to see that actually with digital, you can make it easier to get translations. It's a lot of work for us, but you can make it easier to get translations for people. You can have material done in different ways. We've really had to think about using imagery and animations and things like that to help convey points to people, because it's not just different languages in terms of like English, Spanish, or French. It's sort of different languages in terms of the generations that we might be talking to and how they might engage with a computer and the IT literacy and things like this. So yeah, it's a really interesting space to be in at the moment.
That in itself is a really interesting topic, and I think once the dust has settled from COP, I'd love to have you back just to talk about that exact thing, and I think about understanding your audiences in a digital space. Look, Ash, I know how incredibly busy you are. Best of luck with the platform and the show. If you've heard anything today that you're interested in about digital transformation, around your views on how to engage with audiences and even sustainable footprints for digital events, please leave a comment in the box below. Ash, thank you very much and have a good week, everyone.
You're welcome.